Hello, Happy Valley. Today's video is all about the mandala, a sacred symbol to many Eastern cultures and religions. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the history of the mandala. A mandala is a geometric configuration of symbols, shapes, and patterns that begin at a central point and work their way outwards. Mandalas use the principle of design known as balance. In fact, they use radial balance because they are radiating out from a central point, from that middle point. So the circle is found all throughout nature. Really, the circle with a center is the basic structure of creation. However, a perfect circle cannot exist outside of mathematics. And what I mean by this is the exact measurements, the perfection. This cannot be found outside of math. However, the circle is found in nature everywhere. The Milky Way galaxy is our solar system, and within our solar system is Earth. Living things are made of cells, and each cell has a nucleus, all displayed as circles with centers. The crystals that form ice, or the rocks that create mountains or flowers, spiderwebs, and the rings found in tree trunks all reflect this idea of the circle with a center. So this fascination and interest in circles predates recorded history, meaning that this was interesting to people long before they wrote down things. So there have been many cultures that pay homage to the simple shape of the circle. Everything is cyclic. We have this circle of life, whether that's a life cycle or a nature cycle. Life cycle, birth to adolescence, to adulthood, to old age, to death, even the seed from its initial being planted to growing roots, to its maturation, to falling off of a tree, to being replanted and reborn. Okay, we have everything cyclic. Nature cycles or life cycles, spring, summer, fall, winter, everything is working in a circle. So a mandala is very symbolic in many cultures, especially Eastern Asian cultures like India, China, Japan, because they see this as a mystic symbol of the universe, this cyclic thing. Things are working in a cyclic pattern. The word mandala is from the classical language known as Sanskrit, which means center or circle. So you might be asking yourself, what in the world is Sanskrit? And it's a classical language that belongs to areas like South Asia or India. And classical languages are an ancient written language. They're usually dead, like a Latin. And Sanskrit was a common language from about 1500 BCE. And BCE stands for before the Common Era. So you might have in earlier grades used BC, and they would say it was before Christ, or AD standing for after death. In art history or in real deep histories, we use BCE, or we'll see CE. So I want you to know what those are. BCE, before the Common Era, CE, Common Era. So today, Sanskrit is spoken by less than 1% of Indians, and is mostly used by Hindu priests during religious ceremonies. And it's actually comprised of about 49 a character alphabet. So we have 26. This would have had about 49 characters. So it's really hard to pinpoint the exact origin or time that the mandala was brought about, but most likely it was born from Hinduism, which is the main religion of India. In fact, 95% of the country's population are Hindus. So the symbol in red is known as the Uman, a Sanskrit spiritual symbol representing Hinduism. And Hinduism is the world's oldest still practiced religion. In fact, they have over 900 million followers, which would be about 25% of the entire world's population. Now, to people raised in other faiths like Christianity, Hinduism might seem very complex, but they have a lot of core beliefs, and it's kind of easy to understand. So I'm going to explain their beliefs. They believe in one supreme being, just like Christians with God. Theirs is known as Brahman. So Hindus worship Brahman, but he also has a variety of gods and goddesses that personify aspects of him. So it's kind of like he has multiple personality, and he's one man or one being, and then he has all these different personalities that come out of him. Again, Brahman is the universe. God is one, but he is known through many. In fact, if you've ever heard of Krishna, Father Krishna, he's one of the most famous and well-known of the gods. He is the god of compassion. George Harrison, the Beatle, he got into Hinduism, and he sings a song called My Sweet Lord, and he sings about Krishna. So there is not a set of beliefs like the Christians do, where we have 10 commandments. Instead, Hindus, they follow ideas or concepts. And one of those is that they strive for moral order, knowing the difference between right and wrong. They also promote tolerance. Tolerance as in keeping an open mind, understanding that people see things, perceive things, and believe things in different ways, and being accepting of those beliefs, but also understanding that you have your own. So tolerating other people. Remember, if you ever have a sibling, sometimes you have to tolerate them. You might not believe the same things as them, or you might not act the same way as them, but you need to tolerate them so that you can work together and live together harmoniously. They believe in karma. Who doesn't? They believe that whatever you do unto people is going to be done back to you. So they believe in this idea of do well with others and you will receive the same in return. They also believe in reincarnation. Again, here's this idea of the cycle. So from birth all the way to death and being back born again. So this idea is if you are in this particular life, you need to act well, you need to know the difference between right and wrong, because it's going to follow you into your next life, and so on and so forth. It's this continuous cycle. So to teach these ideas, there are Brahmin, which are teachers. These are gurus or priests. If you've ever heard of a guru, that's just a Brahmin. And that is just a teacher of this and a protector of the sacred learning. So mandalas in Hinduism are typically, a circle enclosed inside of a square. And this style of art, mostly with a mandala, is known as a yantra, which is just a geometric design. And it represents communication with higher powers, and it's very, very sacred. You can see these mandala art all throughout India, in temples, and on the streets. It's a very sacred symbol to the Hindu people. So the yantra, again, is the main type of mandala, a Hindu mandala, and it has some specific designs to it. So this central dot is known as the Bendu, and it's just a representation of the universe, where the artwork is starting. Think of that universe where we have that central point. Lotus flowers generally represent purity, and then the triangle, depending on the way that it's positioned, depends on its symbolism. So an upward facing triangle generally is a feminine energy, and it represents action. A downward facing triangle is more masculine, and it represents creativity and the pursuit of knowledge. So like Hinduism, Buddhism, another Eastern religion, they also find the mandala to be a very sacred thing. So Buddhism is a little bit different than Hinduism. They have a lot of similarities in their ideas and their beliefs. Hinduism does not have a founder. There wasn't one person who really started Hinduism. It kind of grew out of an archaic or ancient tribal type religion. However, Buddhism does have a founder, and his name is Siddhartha Gautama. I probably really butchered that name, but Siddhartha Gautama. And he is known as Buddha. He was from the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and he is the founder of Buddhism. So his story is quite interesting. He was born into wealth. He's from aristocracy. He was pretty much a prince, and he grew up on this compound, this large, vast area of land. Now he's from roughly about 600 BCE, and so came way after Hinduism and this idea. So he has this interesting life. He's a prince. He's never left the compound. He's never seen poor people or anything like that. And one day he leaves, and he is just saddened by the suffering that he sees. And he decides to leave his compound, to walk away from his riches, and to live this life of being the enlightened one and helping others throughout this suffering. In fact, what he did was he meditated, he fasted for 48 days in one place. It doesn't mean he didn't eat for 48 days. He just ate very minimally, and he really meditated spiritually. And he believed that he understood the cure for this suffering, for this sorrow, and he became Buddha. So he ended up having a bunch of followers that followed in his ideas and his foundation. And then after his death, it's those people who really brought it on and carried it on, through, and so then it finally became Buddhism. Now, Buddhism has 4 truths, 4 noble truths, and they are really the heart of Buddhism. So their beliefs are that all life is full of suffering, pain, and sorrow. Now, suffering is not like, oh, woe is me, I'm suffering. That's not the same idea here. Suffering is meaning the desire for things that are just really illusions. Okay, so wanting to be rich, that's a sorrow, that's suffering. Wanting to have power, that's suffering. Wanting to live a long life, that's suffering. That's painful. This desire for things that are just an illusion. They're not realistic. You can't grasp them and hold them. So the only cure for suffering is to overcome those desires. Desires to be rich, desires to be powerful, desires to have a long life. And in order to do this, you have to follow the Eightfold Path, or there's steps to do this, and you need to follow them. So it's kind of like the 10 Commandments. The Eightfold Path is around the similarities. You need to do these 8 things in order to become enlightened, in order to reach this end. So Buddhism believes in reincarnation, just like Hindus, except Hindus believe that that's it. You're just going to continually stay in this cycle. Buddhism believes that you can break the cycle. And to do that, you have to reach nirvana, to reach this heaven, to reach being enlightened, to realize that suffering and pain and sorrow, these are just illusions. Okay, so your ultimate goal is to become a Buddha. And in order to do this, really you do this through meditation. And so when you are on your way to this Buddhahood, this is known as Bada Vista. I'm probably really butchering that, but it's like, baby Buddha. You're on your way to becoming an enlightened one. And I believe, don't quote me, but I believe when you look at a lot of Eastern Buddhism art and you see a skinnier Buddha, that's somebody who's not Buddha yet. They're on their way to becoming Buddha. Once they're like the little fat, happy little guy, that's Buddha. So the mandala in Buddhism is very sacred. In fact, this idea of the mandala really kind of sits with Buddhism. When people talk about mandalas, they usually tend to think of Buddhism, not so much Hinduism, even though it really probably came from the Hinduists. So, and it's because of these Buddhist monks. These are the Tibetan monks over here in the right-hand corner. You've probably seen them a lot in movies. If there's ever a Eastern monk in a movie, these are the guys that they're going to represent. Have you ever seen 2012? Those are the Tibetan monks. I know that they're in the movie Anger Management. They're in all kinds of movies. There's all kinds of movies featuring these guys, and they typically are wearing the same outfit. They've got that maroon colored, I'm probably saying the wrong word, but sari, and then they got the orangey red outfits on. So these Tibetan monks, they create mandalas, but they're made from sand, and they're very sacred. They're actually made from crushed marble, and they create these through, they scoop up the sand with these little tools, and then they create vibrations on the tools, which will slowly let out the sand onto the composition. And these mandalas that they create, these are just maps from which the mind can transform. It's a way of meditation, taking an ordinary mind into a more enlightened, meditated mind. So these maps that they're creating, these are representations of the divine, of the heavenly form. Okay? And this whole ceremony of creating this mandala, they spend, sometimes 9 to 10 hours, even days, creating these mandalas. And then once they are created, they're destroyed. You think, why would you destroy something so beautiful? But destruction is a very important part of the ceremony. And it's symbolizing that life is temporary. Nothing is set in stone. Things change. So sacred geometry is another idea of the mandala in a different form. And it's an ancient science that explores and explains energy patterns that create and unify all things and reveal precise ways that energy of creation organizes itself. So it's said that every natural pattern of growth or movement comes back to one or more geometric shape. That circle of life. Think of the universe, or the way that trees are created with the rings of the tree, or spider webs, how they all start at that central point. Crystal formations. Again, we have this idea that everything goes back to geometry. And with sacred geometry, we have many different patterns or templates that are used in this idea. But some of the most prominent ones, the most used ones, the most seen ones are going to be the seed of life, which is over in the right-hand corner top, all the way to the other side, the left-hand side of the top, which would be the flower of life. And then Metatron's cube, which is in that middle row on the right-hand side. These are some of the most commonly seen sacred geometry templates or patterns. And there is an American artist known as Charles Gilchrist who has been studying sacred geometry, who has been studying the mandala and Eastern practices, and so he has created his own representations of this through his artworks. I think they are so just packed full of fun geometric designs, and they're quite cool to look at. So, an interest in Eastern Asia and their spirituality and the culture has really seen a push in Western culture, and it's become more of a trend. So today it's not uncommon to find mandalas in everyday objects like home furnishings or decor, hanging tapestries or clothing, even tattoos. But these trends are focusing more on the decorative aspects rather than the spiritual meaning behind the mandala.